We adore and worship Yahweh, the only one. We don't adore ancestral spirits. We don't worship idols of animals, trees, stones, the sun, the stars, or the moon, which Yahweh has made.
Australia and Southeast Asia are on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, more than 8,000 miles away from South America. It's true that during the Ice Age, there was a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska. In theory, the ancestors of the Aborigines could have migrated north and crossed over into Alaska. But they wouldn't have made it very far. A permanent mass of ice sat on Canada for thousands of years. That wall of ice would have blocked the way into America to both animals and humans. But could there have been another route to South America?
Scientific American. Escape to America. The last ice age ended and the land bridge began to disappear beneath the sea some 13,000 years ago. Global sea levels rose as the vast continental ice sheets melted, liberating billions of gallons of fresh water. As the land bridge flooded, the entire Beringian region grew more warm and moist, and the scrub tundra vegetation spread rapidly, outcompeting the steppe tundra plants that had dominated the interior lowlands of Beringia. While this spelled the end of the woolly mammoths and other large grazing animals, it probably also provided the impetus for human migration. As retreating glaciers opened new routes into the continent, humans traveled first into the Alaskan interior and the Yukon, and ultimately south out of the Arctic region and toward the temperate regions of the Americas. The first definitive archaeological evidence we have for the presence of people beyond Beringia and interior Alaska comes from this time, about 13,000 years ago. These people are called Paleo-Indians by archaeologists. The genetic evidence records mutations in mitochondrial DNA passed from mother to offspring that are present in today's Native Americans, but not in the Malta remains. This indicates a population isolated from the Siberian mainland for thousands of years, who are the direct ancestors of nearly all of Native American tribes in both North and South America, the original first people.
We're now going forward in time to show how the actual growth of the Earth took place. Imperfect as to details, but the overall is nailed. Antarctica, as you see, has become subtropical. Africa and a smaller globe move way downward under the globe. In fact, for hundreds of millions of years, the bottom of Africa was the South Pole. South America's tail goes under and wraps around the bottom of Africa. Then incredibly, it joins coast with Antarctica. 65 million years ago and more, these continents were joined, and marsupials like the duck-billed platypus roamed from Australia, Antarctica, and across southern South America and up into Africa, the platypus. Dinosaurs roamed all over this world on the upper tectonic plate because there were no oceans, just shallow seas. Here today, Antarctica is frozen over, and Australia and its surrounding islands are the remaining home of marsupials. Do you see how broadly the Pacific is opening compared to the Atlantic? This is exactly why the knee-jerk Pangea theory exists. The Pacific spread is too difficult to easily visualize because it's so big. The Atlantic spread is so obvious that a child would recognize it, but they are the same.
According to conventional scientific theory, no human beings were alive then to witness these events. Or were they? Over 100 million years ago, the limestone bedrock of the Biloxi River in Texas was a muddy plain. It was here that countless dinosaurs left their footprints to be fossilized and preserved forever. But the tracks of another creature have also been preserved in these banks, possibly the tracks of man. Archaeologist Carl Bau has led the investigation of these controversial prints for over 12 years.
My reaction was one of shock. I had heard of human footprints being found in this locale on the Biloxi near Glen Rose, Texas, but I was rather skeptical. And here, after removing actual rock layers, the team and I excavated a series of dinosaur footprints. And 18½ inches from one of those dinosaur footprints, we excavated a 16-inch human footprint. We excavated 12 footprints in a series. And when you find a trail with left, right pace and stride, the right distance apart, then you have to interpret this as belonging to humankind.
It's been claimed that the Biloxi River footprints are a hoax carved into the limestone bedrock as a tourist attraction.
Well, we found trails leading under limestone ledges and actually removed the limestone ledges one slab of rock at a time. And we found that both the dinosaur footprints and the trail of human footprints continued under the rock ledges. This evidence is real.
I first saw the Burdick print on my initial visit to Glen Rose in 1984. My impression at that time was that it was too perfect. But it's clearly a human footprint demonstrating the heel section, the arch, the base of the metatarsals, the first or great toe, second, third, fourth, and fifth toe.
After our examination of this print, we find that it definitely is in the Cretaceous limestone, in the same formation with the dinosaur footprints. Here we're looking at a cross-section, and we can see very obvious following contours under the great toe, and actually structures under each one. Where we see the calcite inclusion, the force was concentrated and produced these load-bearing structures, which are exactly what geologists look for. We have eliminated the idea that it's carved. It definitely is original impression in the sediment.
My first reaction on reading the paper was, no, this is wrong, something's wrong.
They're going to think, this is crazy, this is outrageous.
I didn't believe it. I still don't believe it properly.
It really is a paradigm shift in terms of when humans arrived on this continent.
And if it does turn out to be true, it changes absolutely everything.
We're excited about the publication of a research project we've been working on for a few years that I guess in a nutshell we could call the oldest archaeological site here in North America. I first visited the site the day it was discovered. I was called by Richard Cerruti, a field paleontologist here at the museum, that he had discovered what he thought was a mammoth at a freeway construction site that he was monitoring. We started realizing early on that there was some odd aspects with the skeleton. First of all, it was a mastodon, not a mammoth. But we also found pieces of sharply broken rock, such as this specimen. This is actually the first rock specimen that Richard discovered. And that was in association with sharply broken bones of this mastodon. I mean, this is part of a leg bone of a mastodon. And then we also found a large rock in association with these bones, which poses a puzzle, because the remains of this mastodon were found in a silt layer. And geological processes that would deposit silt are not going to be depositing or carrying rocks of this size. And so we're looking at this and thinking, well, how did those rocks get there? What makes sense to us, although it's out there, is that the hypothesis suggesting that humans brought these rocks to this site and that humans used these rocks to break bone like this. It wasn't until 2012 that we had really reliable dates that the site was as old as 130,000 years.
It's 100,000 years older than the broadly accepted dates for the first occupation of the Americas. Now, as far as we understand from things like genetics and the archaeology, people move into the Americas sometime maybe 23,000 years ago or less, and they come across the Bering Straits, and these are the ancestors of all the modern First Nation peoples of the Americas today. 130,000 years ago, it's different. The sea lane in between the two continents, between northeastern Siberia and between Alaska, is wider. So that's one problem with this. How do we get humans across? And the other question is, which humans are they going to be? So there are a number of possibilities, but until we actually find a skeleton at this site or at a site of a comparable age in the Americas, it's all open to speculation, and we just don't know.
So for the archaeologists say that it's outrageous, how can this be? There's really no evidence other than this one site that the humans were here 130,000 years ago. I mean, one of the answers to that question is that, well, if archaeologists aren't looking at rocks this old, so how can they find evidence if they're not looking in the right place?
Whether the evidence for human interaction with the site is convincing or not, to be honest with you, I'm a little skeptical. My thing is stone tools, and I look at the pictures of the stones from there. I put them against the fact that there are no knapped stone tools around there at all. And for me, that starts to ring alarm bells a little. I suspect in the long run, most people will want to see it more rigorously investigated. So are the stone tools really properly bashed, or is there some explanation for it? Is the bashing on the bones genuinely what they think?
Of course, there are other ways to break bone, besides just smashing them with a rock. But as we examined closely the specimens that we had from our site, we found no marks that were consistent with those kinds of alternative hypotheses. And we even experimented with replicating how bones break and took hammerstones and broke elephant bone to see what kind of damage that caused to the bones. And the pattern of breakage was consistent with what we found at our site here in San Diego.
Oh my God.
There have been stranger discoveries in archaeology. How implausible is 130,000? Well, maybe it's not completely impossible, but I think it's less of a filling in of a gap than an opening of a whole new chapter.
But who were these pioneers? A much earlier wave of Mongoloids, or another race altogether? Clues to the identity of the first Americans are emerging in rock shelters in the northeast and southeast of Brazil. Archaeologists there have recently unearthed human remains. Prehistoric skulls were found buried in layers of soil 9 to 12,000 years old. They are the oldest skulls in the Americas. And this is the oldest of them all. The skull of a young woman nicknamed Luthia by scientists. Can she tell us who the first Americans were? Walter Neves is a physical anthropologist at Sao Paulo University in Brazil. He's been using a standard and reliable archaeological measure, the shape of the skull, to find out what race she belonged to.
91.
He fully expected Luthia to be a Mongoloid, an ancestor of the American Indians.
91.
But then he fed the measurements into the computer.
When we start running the computer and seeing the results, it was amazing because we realized that the statistics, the quantitative analysis we were doing was not showing these people to be Mongoloid. In fact, the analysis was showing these people was anything except Mongoloid.
So who was Luthia? And where did she come from? To find out, the skull was taken to a hospital in Rio de Janeiro to begin the process of reconstructing her face. The first stage was to make a three-dimensional CAT scan of Luthia's skull in order to build a replica. The cast was then given to Richard Neve of the University of Manchester in England, one of the world's leading forensic artists, to recreate her features.
That, to me, is a Negroid face that has all the features that you associate with a Negroid face. The proportions of the face, it doesn't say anything about it being
If it
Mongoloid.
escapes you, let me explain. The current American education states African Americans were brought to America as slaves from Africa, which is simply not true. They are American indigenous, not descendants of Africans. As they say, the truth is stranger than fiction. Although this fact isn't spoken of openly, it's not a secret. However, with programming such as Roots, 12 Years a Slave, The African American Story, and The Book of Negroes, is it any wonder why so many African Americans are confused? We won't address all the misleading DNA tests being provided to connect African Americans to Africa. So, the argument is, do they continue identifying as African Americans, which is a fake identity for them, or embrace being identified as Indigenous Americans?
Are there any consequences of choosing one identity over the other?
William, that's a good question. According to African Americans Ain't Africans Facebook forum, identifying as African American is to quietly relinquish ancestral connections to America, connections that go back hundreds of thousands of years. Curious story, but one appropriate for February, which is Black History Month in the United States.
Characters who drop weak cuts. $125 was the price tag on them. Cool brothers buy them even though they don't want them. Style is a must, but the style is rough. China Beats boots couldn't crush more stuff. Strap them down, lace them up, get in the bucket. Reach for the tongue, pull it out, then tuck it. 10-pound boots could destruct all comers. My whole posse wears them Fort Lewis runners. Kicking over big motorbikes. Sound effect. Stepping over puddles in the hood. Sound effect. Girls laugh, but you know they look good. Sound effect. Waffle like prints in the snow. Sound effect. Pulverized punks when we throw. Sound effect. Salute to the group in the booth. Sound effect. Bow and we kick you in the snoot. Gore-Tex. .9 to the booth ricochet, leaving mud prints when I romp in the rain. Drop black scars on a new gym floor. Pimps like to win when they kick them whores. This is it, baby, spit shine black boots. Running over punks like Iranian troops. Trample, crush, hitting like a dump truck. Jump in my face and a size 12 get stuck in your butt cause you wanted to box. 1-2 punch and the Gore-Tex drop on your throat. The brother got cut by Gore-Tex boots from the Gore-Tex shop. Get it?